My name is Veronica Parker with AEBG TAP, and on the line today we have Nicole Alexander and Neil Kelly of the AEBG office, as well as Ryan French with Product Ops. They will be presenting on expense reports and future NOVA enhancements. So before we get started, I'll go over a few housekeeping items. So for those of you who did not receive the PowerPoint via email, it is available to you via the resource pod. So please feel free to download this PowerPoint presentation and use it as a guide this afternoon. If you have any questions, please be sure to post them in the chat pod. Throughout the webinar today, those questions will be addressed, so please be sure to post them in the chat pod. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please also post those that in the chat pod, and then we'll move to a private chat to address your technical issues. The webinar is being recorded this afternoon and will be available on the California Adult Education website. I'll be sure to post the URL of the webpage where the archived webinar recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be located. So if you have to leave for any reason, or if you need to come back to review the materials, you are able to do so on the California Adult Education website. On the last webinar we had, there were some participants who had let us know that the screenshots that are used throughout the webinar on the PowerPoint are a little difficult to see, so we are addressing those issues. You are more than welcome to go to a full screen to view the webinar this afternoon. You would do so by selecting the 4 outward-facing arrows that are located up top next to the attendees list. When you select that, your screen will go to a full screen. However, please note that you will not be able to see or contribute to the chat pod. So if chatting or asking and answering questions is important to you, please be cautious when you do that. You are able to come back in automatically by selecting the outward-facing arrows, which now would be inward-facing. So that will give you a little bit more, a bigger visual of the PowerPoint presentation. So I just wanted to go over that. And I'm not seeing any issues with sound, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Neil, who will get us started with today's webinar. Neil?
Thanks, Veronica. Hi, this is Neil Kelly with the AEBG office, and we also have, as Veronica said, Nicole Alexander and Ryan French with us today. And wow, I think we were placing bets of how many people we would get on the webinar today, and I think Veronica said about 100, so she might be the winner. So congratulations being on. We had 180 people sign up, 105 are on now, so we're going to get started. Got a lot of stuff to cover today. First of all, as we go through the agenda, I just want to reassure everybody, we're working through some technical bugs on the reporting, and so those upcoming deadlines for Q4, and Nicole's going to go over this, but September 1st and September 30th for those Q4 reports, the submission and certification. If you are experiencing those bugs, we'll be very flexible with those deadlines. You won't be penalized. We'll work with you. So I just want to say that up front so there's no anxiety as we go through everything. So we understand your concern and trying to do everything and submit everything on time, but we'll work with you, and we won't penalize you. And this will be, the first end of the year Q4 report. And so we'll cover that a little bit more in the presentation. Okay, so the agenda today, we're going to give a little adult ed update, technical update related to NOVA, kind of the stuff we just talked about. And then we're going to go over the fourth quarter expense reporting and talk about the final report by program area, what's happening there, give you an update there. What's this additional reporting? We'll give you a heads up on that. We'll talk about targets and closing out 16-17 funds. And then for those of you that are still working on submitting your annual plan due to technical difficulties, Nicole will just do a refresher on that. And then we'll give you a heads up on the reshuffling of changes for NOVA for this year and the future. So if there's anything else you want me to cover or Nicole or Ryan to address, please use the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat and we can answer questions throughout. We'll also be sharing your questions at appropriate times during the presentation. So let's begin. So big picture, name change. So we're now the Adult Ed program. I always say AEBG/AEP because some people don't know we're AEP, or is it really going to be the Adult Ed program, or is it going to be the California Adult Ed program? But just so you know, in legislation that was passed and signed by the governor for 1819, they did change the name to the Adult Education Program. So we'll be working through on if we call it the California Adult Education Program or just the Adult Education Program, but it is a apportionment type program. It's ongoing, so we've taken the word block and we've taken the word grant out because this is money you'll get every year, just like apportionment or average daily attendance in the old days of K-12. So also they passed in the trailer bill 3-year planning. They extended the current 3-year plan for another year, and then we have the new 3-year plan due probably next May or June in 2019. We do have guidance and templates ready. They're currently being reviewed by Carolyn Zachary and Javier Romero. Once they approve that, we'll release that, and we'll do some webinars and technical training, and we'll be rolling out a lot of workshops and human-centered design and best practices and data dives, all related to that 3-year planning process. Another trailer bill change was the indirect, and we'll talk about that today, but basically starting in 1819 for members only, the indirect change is 5%, or if you're a K-12 or county office, the CDE approved indirect rate, whichever's less. So if your CDE indirect rate for 1819 is 3%, you can only charge the 3%, not the 5%. If you're a community college, your negotiated rate is probably somewhere like 20 or 30%. With this new bill, you can only charge up to 5%. Okay. So then another budget bill item was collecting data by program area, and so they also threw in they want to collect hours of instruction by program area and all the expenditures that go into running programs, which would include fees and donations and other fund sources and local district contribution and you name it, operational costs. So we have a slide on this later on. I'll tell you how we're going to approach this, but this was for 17-18 funds, and so we're kind of developing a strategy on how to deal with that. Another thing that was in the budget bill is using the SSID for students that don't have one, and so CDE is looking at their CalPAD system and talking to those people to see SSIDs in the K-12 world. What does that mean? Can we use CalPADs? Can we not? Or can we use a different system? So more to follow on that. Currently right now we have a bill in the legislature for immigrant integration, AB 2098, and so that's being considered. It'll probably be voted on very soon. I think the session ends possibly next week or something like that, so we should find out. And of course we have field team recommendations that are winding up, and we'll see of those recommendations which are going to go forward, short-term and long-term, and so those are currently being kind of wrapped up and will be evaluated by the state. So I'm going to pause there to see if we had any questions. We had a lot of people coming in. So let's see, I'll start from the bottom. What legislation sets the indirect at 5%? That's the trailer bill language, and it was in a letter that the state sent out to all fiscal and consortia level leadership. And so if you want the trailer bill, we have posted it in the newsletter. We posted it on the website. I don't know if Veronica can find it, but she'll post it again. But that starts in 1819. It started July 1, 2018, when the governor signed that budget. So for Anna's question, the indirect change starts in 1718. No, it starts July 1st, 2018. 18. So when you're doing your budgeting for 18-19 and all active funding, you're going to use that new indirect language. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And I think that's all the questions we have there. We're going to move on. Okay, so current NOVA efforts. And Nicole, did you want to talk about this slide? Because I think you were going to say something about this one.
Yes. So, as some of you are aware, we've been working on fixing we've encountered some bugs, which we've been working on fixing. We've also made some updates to the system. But I just wanted to show this screenshot because as you scroll down, when you're in NOVA, as you scroll down to any of the pages that you're in NOVA, you'll see kind of the California Community Colleges logo, and you'll also see the site version. And the site version is number is actually a link that you can click on, and I've highlighted it here, but I'm going to use this pointer that Veronica just showed me how to use. So if you click on this number right here, it'll then pull up the release notes page, and so this will be a way for you to check, what we've done or the status of some of the things that you've encountered. Of course, you can always contact our office, but if you just want to quickly kind of see what's going on with the system, when you click on that link, it'll take you to the NOVA release notes page, and this kind of shows the date of the most recent release and kind of what bug fixes were corrected, what features we've added. And also, I just wanted to share that we have recently had some bugs revolving around the password reset functionality, which I believe has been taken care of, but there was an issue with folks that needed to reset their password, and the system was just kind of redirecting them back in a circular loop. So that's been taken care of. We also had an issue with the Q4 report. Folks were getting a refresh error message. That should have been taken care of as well. Currently, we do have an issue with budget revisions, and we're still working on fixing that. The fix is a little bit more complicated than we anticipated, so please hold tight on that. I think we have a slide to kind of cover that in a few slides from now, but as Neil mentioned, we will be working with you. We will be very flexible on the deadlines, and we understand these issues are impacting you from moving forward. And lastly, we did do an update regarding the annual plan. We had situations where there weren't enough strategy. There were strategy button limits, so we removed the limits on the number of strategies that you can have for each section, and we also doubled the character limits. That was an issue for some folks. So that's been updated. We've notified all of the folks that were having those issues so that they can go in and submit their annual plan.
So Nicole, we have a question from Alejandra. What is the process for budget revisions? Can it be done in NOVA automatically?
The process for budget revision, it's not an automatic process. I mean, someone will have to log into NOVA and submit a budget revision, but basically, once the bug is resolved, your consortia primary contact will need to uncertify your budget. Once they uncertify your budget, it'll put your budget into draft status. When your budget is in draft status, then you should be able to access it, change whatever you need to change, funds around as necessary. Then the member representative for that agency will need to submit their budget, and then the consortia primary contact will then need to certify the budget, and that's kind of the full loop of the process for budget revisions. Right now, we are experiencing an issue with not being able to uncertify the budget, and so that's what's causing the holdup in not being able to do budget revisions. So hopefully, I answered the question about what the process looks like.
I'll add something there, Nicole, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So for the budget revisions, you are able to do the budget revisions. Sorry. You are able to have a budget revision in NOVA. One of the things, and what's the cause of the additional steps, is that you have to have a certified budget to be able to have any expenditures against it, in theory, in NOVA. So a certified budget allows expenditures to be reportable. So unsubmitting historical quarterly fiscal reporting back to Q1 will then free up the ability to unsubmit your budget and work plan to make any changes. You could then go through and resubmit those quarters. So it is extra work. It's not a ton of extra work. It's just basically clicking 3 buttons to unsubmit, and then once you've done your budget revision, clicking those 3 buttons again to resubmit them. But this is what Nicole's referring to. This won't be that way forever. Decoupling those two so you don't need to unsubmit any historical expenditure reporting to be able to do your budget revision is the fix that we're working on. So just FYI, a little additional information there.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Yeah, so as thanks, Ryan. As Ryan mentioned, there is an ability, it's a little bit of complicated. We have to kind of go back and unsubmit reports back to Q1, and we have to do so for all members in the consortia. So if you really do need to have this budget revision now and it can't wait, I can definitely help with that process, but it will, we will have to unravel some of reports that have already been, we'll have to unsubmit reports that have already been submitted and then go back and resubmit, but I can definitely help with that if this is an urgent issue or something that you just need to have right now and can't wait until we can get this issue fixed. Okay, so I'm looking at the questions. I see one from Marisol regarding, I don't see that budget revisions are available for fiscal year 16-17. So in NOVA, we're working off of one budget, which is your total available funds. And so your 16-17 funds are incorporated into your 17-18 budget. So when you do a budget revision, you will be basing your budget revision for your 16-17 funds and also your 17-18 funds. So hopefully that answers your question, but if not, you can definitely contact me offline or through AEBG TAP, and we can get on the phone and talk about your specific situation in detail.
Nicole, I just wanted to add on that one. So for 16-17 funds, because that was the year that we were using the different systems, all you'll see from 16-17 is the carryover amount in NOVA that you brought over from the old system. But like Nicole was saying, you brought that carryover amount in, plus you added the 17-18 funding. Now you're adding the 18-19 funding, but all 3 years of active funding will show up in that one budget and that one expenditure report. So you can modify, and make changes related to that. I guess you can also, if that carryover amount wasn't correct, and we've been doing that over the summer, right, Nicole, that we've been modifying the carryover amount for 16-17 if there were some discrepancies when people were reporting that. But it all flows into NOVA, and it's in one budget and one expenditure report that we track throughout the year. And we'll get a little bit into this later when we go over expenditure reporting and first in, first out, and how we're tracking money to look at the target spending and the corrective action plans. Anything to add there, Nicole?
No, not at all. Thanks, Neil.
Okay. Okay, and then Dan and Patty, can we answer questions at the end? So it's because Dan and Patty, we have so many questions throughout the webinar, it's tough to go back and answer the questions, but bear with us. This is the style we use, and we answer questions and we move on. So just be patient with it. Nicole, did you have another slide to cover?
No, I think that's it for now.
Okay. So moving along, here are some of the things we worked on. The reconciliation, we just talked about that for the carryover. We also had to reprogram some of the COLA, and finance realized that they didn't give us all the COLA because there was a rounding issue, so we had to adjust and add additional money to your budgets for 18-19, so that was fun. And we worked with consortia leads on that, and we got that all into the system. And then Nicole just addressed, and Ryan talked about the budget revisions. We're working on that. And so there's a little more difficult way to do that Ryan explained, or there's a fix that should be taken care of sometime maybe later next month. But either way, we will give you flexibility, and if you don't meet those deadlines, we will work with you on that. So don't worry about that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about indirect. I'm just going to check the chat for a second. Floor had, just for clarity, we are separating our budgets by program area, no longer by objectives and program year, correct? No. So that is not correct. We'll address that a little bit later, and we'll talk about the legislative requirement of program area expenditure reporting, but that is not correct. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression that we're going to be reporting now by program area. We will be reporting by object code and active funding. So that means 16-17 funds that are active, 17-18 funds that are active, and 18-19 funds will all go into your budget and expenditure reporting this year. And then the expenditures within lines for carryover amounts have changed, and NOVA doesn't allow for negative lines. I don't know, Nicole, do you understand Marisol's question on that?
Negative expenditures in any of the object codes. NOVA will still allow you to submit a report if you have negative amounts in any of the object codes. So it shouldn't be preventing you from submitting if you've gone into the negative on any one object code. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, can you hear me now?
Nicole, we can't hear you. Nicole, you need to get a little closer to the mic.
Okay.
No, you need to turn up the volume on your microphone.
Okay.
For some reason,
can you hear me now?
It's a lot lighter than what it was.
Oh, that's better.
So sorry about
now,
that.
Could you re-answer the question, please, because no one heard what you were saying.
While we've instructed folks to not submit reports that have negative balances in any of the object codes, NOVA will not prevent you from submitting a report if you do have a negative balance in any of the object codes. So hopefully, Marisol, that answers your question. You can still proceed with submitting your report with negative balances. However, since this is the Q4 report and the last report for the fiscal year, we would prefer for you to wait until the issue with the budget revision is corrected, because it is the final report for this year. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So getting into indirect. So indirect for 17-18, members must report their indirect as defined in your accounting manual. So that would be, if you're a college, it's the budget and accounting manual. If you're a K-12 or county office, it's the CDE school accounting code structure. So operational costs are not indirect costs. Indirect costs cannot be reported in object code 7000 in NOVA. Indirect costs for 17-18 is the CDE approved rate for K-12s and county offices, and the negotiated rate for community colleges. If your 17-18 indirect rate in NOVA is red, ignore that for now because that was programmed for the 18-19 year. So let's see the difference here. So that's 17-18, and here's 18-19, starting with the 18-19 budget. So this would be in effect for your expense reporting for Q1 for 18-19. You have to use, if you're a K-12 and county office, use the CDE approved indirect rate or 5%, whichever is less. Community colleges use the agreed upon indirect rate or 5%, whichever is less. And then Veronica shared the trailer bill language earlier, so you have a better idea with that. So Amy said, why indirect in 7,000 that follows the CSAM? Well, it doesn't follow NOVA. So the way we set up NOVA is because there's a compliance issue with the indirect, we have to put it on a separate line item so we can calculate to see if you're using or going over the 5%. So for NOVA, Amy, you have to put it in the indirect line. You can't put it in the 7,000 because there could be other charges in the 7,000, and that wouldn't really tell us if you're violating or a compliance issue of following the legislative language of the 5% limit or the CDE approved rate, whichever is less. So please work with us on that. We know you have internal accounting and CDE accounting, but this is the NOVA system, and this is the adult ed system, so you have to follow our rules if you receive this funding. You report your SAC stuff to CDE on a separate situation, but with our program, you got to follow what's going on in NOVA as well. So that's why we have to separate that out to double check the indirect, or have your consortia lead double check that indirect. Okay. Rhonda says, what object code do we use for indirect in NOVA if not the 7,000? You use the indirect line. So in NOVA, yes, there's an expenditure report.
There is when
Nicole, did they fix that? They have a line marked indirect in NOVA for expenditure and budgeting. Was that fixed? Do we have that set to go? Right. So if that doesn't show up, that means you didn't budget for your indirect. So you have to go back in and make sure you address that budget item, or else it won't show up in your expenditure
budget card
report.
Labeled indirect, then your budget is not going to show an indirect line because the budgets do not show anything that has a zero allocation. The budget doesn't show. So if that's the case, you will need to do a budget revision to reopen your budget and add in the indirect line to your budget.
Right. And the reason we do that is a compliance issue to make sure you're not violating the trailer bill language. So Lovey says 5% only for AEP funds or for all adult ed funding. No, it's just for adult education program AEBG funding, Lovey. And does the 5% cap on indirect apply to data and accountability funds? No, the data and accountability funds still follow the grant project language that we sent out when we sent out that money. So that hasn't changed. That's on a separate track that's related to data and accountability funding, which are kind of set up as a grant, which will be expiring at the end of this year as well. Okay, so last, don't confuse the indirect for members with the consortia level admin cap, which is also 5%. So make sure you don't confuse that. Now, another thing in NOVA that you could do, so you're not putting the admin for your consortia on the same line as your member indirect, you could use the consortia level admin where you're going to put that. You could put that on the 7,000s because that way it doesn't overstate your indirect and you're combining the member indirect with the consortia indirect for those members that are also reporting consortia level admin. So that could be helpful as well.
Yeah, sure, deal. Yes. So.
Hey, expense reporting. We're going to turn that over to Nicole. Or maybe I'll do the first one. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so like we said, we're going to be flexible with this because of the bugs. We do have a member deadline of September 1st for fourth quarter expense reports, and we have a September 30th consortium certification of those reports. If you're experiencing problems or technical issues, we will allow you to go past these deadlines, so don't worry about that. You won't be penalized. We would like you to report positive numbers, no negatives, and the expenditures reports cannot be submitted
No,
if
I
the
think you covered
expenditures
it. Thanks,
exceed
Neil.
the allocated amount for the given object code. So we don't want to see those negative balances. Nicole, anything to add on
I'll
that?
go over how to complete your expenditure report in NOVA. This is a review for some of you. We've kind of gone
Okay,
through
if you want to
these
take
slides a
them
few
through
times
the
now.
screens,
So
that would be
I'll go
great.
through it kind of quickly. We have some other things to talk about. But to access the expenditure reports, once you log into NOVA, select AEBG under Funds, and then click on Fiscal Reporting, which is located on the left blue navigation pane. And this will then bring you to the Fiscal Reporting dashboard. And from here, you can scroll through the list to find your consortium, or you can use the filter located at the top of the screen. I'll use this nifty arrow here. So you can use this filter, and it'll start, once you type in and click on Apply Filters, it'll then pull up your consortia. You can also search for previously submitted reports by using the fiscal year and period filters that are located at the top of the screen, which are highlighted in yellow here. So as you're going in to complete your quarter 4 report, you just want to make sure that quarter 4 is selected under the period filter. Okay, and then once you click on your consortium, it will then direct you to this page where you'll find all of your member agencies' quarterly reporting templates, and you'll also notice a summary of the submittal status located at the top of the screen. This shows basically who is submitted. For quarter 4, green check marks mean that they've been submitted, and so this will show the summary for all 4 quarters. As you scroll through the page, you'll then find all of the member agency expenditure reporting templates. And again, as Ryan mentioned, you will only be able to access your agency's reporting template if your budget is in certified status. So if you navigate to this page and you can't find the reporting template for your agency, it's likely because your budget is in draft status, and as a result will not even appear to allow you to enter expenditure reporting. And as we've mentioned before, only the member representative for that agency will have the ability to submit information for the agency. So member contacts can enter information and edit the information, but only the member representative can submit. Through the last slide and this slide, or?
So Nicole, can you repeat that again? Irma's asking you to just walk her back through that one more time.
So member contacts can enter and edit information for the expenditure reporting, but only member representatives
I think the last part that you just went through on submitting.
So if you need a specific person to be able to submit the report, then you'll need to update their role to be that of a member representative. So hopefully I got everything that you needed, Irma.
I hope so. So Nicole, here's a good example on the screenshot that you can see the 7,000s and you can see the indirect costs. So if you're reporting your member indirect, it's going to go in the line marked indirect costs. And that's where we're going to have the threshold of the 5% or the CDE approved rate, depending on what agency you are. And then if you want to, so you don't blow past your indirect limit, you could put that consortia admin under the 7,000 if you wanted to separate the two. And we could have a discussion with that consortium if you wanted to try something else.
Yeah, thanks,
but we
Neil.
really didn't want to combine the consortia admin with the member indirect. And we have a few instances where consortia are working through that. So
if your budget
thank you for the
doesn't show this
screenshot.
line,
Looks really
it means
good.
that you, when the budget was entered, that there wasn't anything entered for indirect, so then it's not going to show this line. But this column right here that my pointer is pointing at shows the project budget line, and this is how the funds were allocated. And that is why this line appears, is because there were funds allocated to the indirect line. So when you enter your quarter 4 expenditures, you'll be entering it into this column that's titled year-to-date expenditures. We've mentioned this a few times, but your reporting is done on a cumulative basis. So it's your year-to-date expenditures for quarter 4. We do have a couple of other columns here that I can show you. I'm going to quickly go through that. We have a year-to-date forecast column. This is a new concept that we're introducing for the fiscal year 18-19, and this is intended to serve as a planning tool. So we will go over this in depth when we get to the fiscal year 18-19 budget submission process, and we'll go through it in more detail. But for now, the forecast column has been pre-populated with the spending targets for that quarter, which for quarter 4 is 60%. But ideally, as you build your budget for 18-19, you'll populate this area with how you anticipate you'll be spending your funds, which may or may not be in line with the targets. So it would kind of help give us a full picture of what's going on, where there might be in quarter 1 you might not meet your target, but eventually you will get there. But this is how you were planning on spending your funds.
So Nicole, just a couple of questions, one I'll address and then one I'll have you address. So Marisol asked, so the entire admin expenditures must go in 7,000, not split 1,000 to 6,000 categories. So it's really up to your consortia what your comfort level is. So if you have consortia level admin charges that are not to exceed 5% of your total allocation, you can split those between the 1,000 and 6,000, because we're going to ask you to check a box that says, I did not exceed the 5% as allowed for consortia level admin expenditures. So with that certification, we feel pretty good that you haven't violated that. And so whatever you're comfortable with of showing that in the expenditure reporting for that member that's taking on those consortia level expenses, we'll give you that flexibility. You could use 7,000 if you're not comfortable with splitting that out, or if it's too much work to split that out. But so we'll give you a few options. But having that checkbox does alleviate us to audit that, knowing that you confirmed that that consortia level expenses didn't exceed the 5% as allowed. So Nicole, there was a question about, and Ryan did answer it, but wanted you to share this with everyone. There was a question about what browser do you use for Nova? And Ryan said Chrome will always be the best browser for Nova. So Nicole, in your experience
can cause visibility
with the browsers,
issues.
what suggestions do you have, and what have you seen among users when they use different browsers? Sometimes will not allow you to access the approve button, or the display just looks kind of funky.
So So the best thing to try is to try to use the Chrome browser, and if you are experiencing issues or you're not able to see what you should be seeing on the screen. And most of the time that does correct the issue. We were experiencing issues with folks that were trying to approve their annual plan, and they weren't able to access the approve button for their member agency, and most of the time it was a browser issue. So Chrome is the best browser that will give you the most ideal experience in navigating Nova.
Thanks, Nicole. So there is a few questions on just explaining Q4 and year to date. So the question came in, just so I'm clear, the column on the left that you were populating, we are entering not the fourth quarter expenditures, but the entire year-to-date figures. I think that's a correct statement, right? Because
yes,
you're entering your total year-to-date, you're just not entering only the fourth quarter. So when we say Q4, it's really a rolling year-to-date figure, correct? Okay, and then the follow-up to that is,
Correct. Yes.
did
You're
you
entering
say
your
we enter
year-to-date
only
from July
Q4
1,
expenditures and
2017,
year-to-date expenditure
through
columns? And I
June
think that would
30th,
be a no,
2018
you're
for
entering
report.
your year-to-date numbers. Is that correct, Nicole? Right. Oh, that's right. We were going to change the quarters. So quarter 1 would be 7/1 to 9/30. Quarter 2 would be 7/1 to 12/31. Quarter 3 would be 7/1 to 3/31. Quarter 4 would be 7/1 to 6/30. So it seems like
I had to
it's
unmute.
still a problem.
This is,
Ryan, are we
if we change it here, it would change for other programs.
that
That's been the
and
hang up
fix those up top?
on relabeling these quarters. So just FYI, it is cumulative expenditures. If we can change it, we will. However, we would have to get everybody to align.
Gotcha. Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense because it's not just AEBG. There's guided pathways. There's strong workforce. There's integrated planning. There's a bunch of other programs. So we'll just keep reminding you, since you're going to be doing this on a quarterly basis. I think once you get the hang of it, you'll realize that the quarters are, every quarter starts with July 1 and moves forward. So we'll work with you on that. We had a question from Jacques. One of our members wanted to enter 0 on her indirect line to indicate that her budget, her district is not charging indirect, but she said the system would not allow an entry of 0. Is that
correct? It will not allow you to enter that. So when you do your reporting, you're only reporting against object codes that you've allocated funds to. So in this situation, it would be assumed that if there is no indirect line, then there is no allocation to the indirect line. Right.
But it would not be an issue for our office. In fact, we would shake their hand that more money is going to the students than going to indirect. So, Jacques, we would give them the gold star. All right, and then we had a question from Cypher. If the consortia did not allocate budget in 7,000 and will be reporting admin expenses in this category, does this require a budget revision to move the project budget from indirect to 7,000? Nicole, I think that would require a budget revision, correct, if it wasn't originally allocated? Okay, so Cypher, you would have to kind of work with us as we're dealing with that budget revision issue. Okay, I think we're okay. And Jody, yeah, Jody, we did suggest that, but there's other programs, and so we couldn't get that through. We apologize, Jody. We're with you on that.
Yes, I just quickly wanted to go over the rest of these columns here. So you'll see you've got columns that show the percentage expended of the year-to-date forecast.
Nicole, do you want to move it? Is there another slide that you want to cover?
I'm pointing at shows what your project budget was. This is how you allocated your funds to the object codes. And then we've got the percentage of expended of the overall budget. This is what you want to pay attention to as far as your targets are concerned. So if you don't meet the target for that quarter, you will be required to enter an explanation. And you'll see that it's highlighted in red in the explanation box. This shows that this is a required field. It'll pop up for you to enter an explanation if your expenditures do not meet the target. And we just need an explanation. I think this is also where the corrective action plan goes. So you'll explain why you didn't meet target. It might be because that's not how you forecasted, but you will eventually meet your target, or you need to tell us what action steps you will be taking to bring your expenditures back up to meet the targets. And then this last column here just shows your remaining budget. And also, as you once you're ready to submit, upon submission of a report, you will need to check a box that states that you have complied with the academic expenditure clause, and there will be a link to that will pull up a PDF, And this box is to certify that this report has been prepared in accordance with the applicable state regulations, that information in this report is accurate and true to the best of your knowledge, and that any information is supported by documentation on file at the district/college. Okay, so I'll move into the next slide. I don't see any other questions. Okay. So when the expenditure report is ready to be submitted, the member representative should click on the Submit Quarter 4 Report button, which is
we're okay right now.
Located at the bottom of the screen right here on the right side. Again, the member representative is the only user role that can submit the expenditure reports. The member contacts can enter and edit information, but only the member representative can submit. And I just want to note that these reports can be submitted and unsubmitted up until the time that the consortia lead certifies the reports for that quarter. If you do need to go back and make changes to a report, and if that quarter has already been certified, you will need to ask your consortia primary contact to uncertify that quarter, which will then open it up for you to be able to unsubmit. Okay, and so once the member representative submits the report, the status will change to submitted, as you can see on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And I'm going to put my pointer right there. So that says submitted. The submit button then changes to display unsubmit, and this is how you can toggle between submitting and unsubmitting your report, again, up until the time that the reports have been certified by your consortia primary contact. And so that's it for this slide. I'll check to see if there's any questions. Okay, so then once all of the member reports have been submitted, the consortia primary contact will be able to certify by clicking on the Certify Quarter 4 button, which is located on the top of the screen. I'm going to put my pointer right there to show that this is how it displays in the screenshot. This also shows who your certifying officer is or certification authority is. The way NOVA works right now is the first primary contact that is listed under your consortia contacts will be pulled to be the certification authority for the expenditure reports. If you have a situation where you need to change the certification authority, I can definitely help you with that. What you need to do is make sure that that person is a primary contact for the consortia, and you need to rearrange the order of how they're listed and have them show as the first primary contact listed. You can also always contact me, and I can help you make those changes so that the appropriate person is the certifier for the expenditure report. And so in this case, for quarter 4, all of the members have green check marks by their name, which means that they've all submitted their report. And so this then allows the consortia lead to certify the reports, and the button does display to say Certified Quarter 4 Report. And again, the consortia primary contact only certifies one time for the expenditure reports for that quarter. So all reports need to be submitted before the consortia primary contact can certify. And then this screenshot shows the quarter 4 reports in certified status. You'll notice that the button now displays to uncertified quarter 4 report. So if changes do need to be made, the consortia primary contact will navigate to this page, click on the uncertified quarter 4 report, which will then open it up for the other reports, for the member reports to be unsubmitted for changes to be made. So this completes kind of the
There is one question, Nicole, I wasn't understanding, but I'll see if you can take a swing at it. Given that we are required to explain transfers between object categories, or object codes, perhaps we should consider imposing the targets on the overall budget. I wasn't understanding that. Does that make sense to you? I'm not sure if do we explain the transfers between object categories? I think we just do a budget revision, right?
So
And then,
I think there isn't a separate field to explain what you're transferring, but when you open your budget to make changes, you would just, as you make changes, you would just populate. There's a description area in each budget card, and so you would populate that area with what's being added. But that is correct. We don't have
the
a
second part is
specific
perhaps
field
we
to
should consider imposing the
changes.
targets on the overall budget. I'm not sure I understand that one. Yeah.
I believe the targets are on the overall budget. So when we're looking at your expenditure report,
okay, that was
and we're looking at what you've expended.
All right, so here's I think this is the question Flora had about program area reporting. So our past webinar, we had thought, that we were going to do this program area reporting, and it was going to be, we were going to put an extra report at the end of Q4. There was going to be a extra report due like in the end of September and due in mid-October. Well, when we looked at the budget bill, there's additional requirements, and I kind of addressed that in the first slide that we went through. Not only do they want program area expenses, they also want hours of instruction. And they also want not only AEBG expense reporting by program area, they want all your expense reporting by program area. So that includes WIO2, that includes CalWORKs, that includes LCFF, non-credit apportionment, if you get that, CalWORKs, Perkins, all those things that go in to run your program. So we realize that request by the legislature is going to take a lot of time. Plus the colleges, they're not even done with recalculation of their hours until February. So moving on to the slide, what we're going to do is hopefully move this out into the early springtime to give you enough time to do that. So I'll just review the bullets really quick. Due to other state mandates and programming costs, there will only be a Q4 report for 17-18. There will not be an extra final report as discussed in the last webinar. The Q4 will be your final report for 17-18. And then I'll go over the legislative mandated reporting requirements by member by program area. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear with that. I know Floor and some other people were thinking that we're doing this program area reporting starting right now. That's something that's going to have to wait till the springtime. And let's take a little look at those requirements. So can't celebrate yet because we have these requirements. Okay, so rolling out hopefully in the spring. Members will be required to submit via NOVA the total 17-18 expenses by object code. This includes all adult education fund expenses, including fee. Well, actually, it's not by object code. Let me correct that. It's by program area. So the slide's a little erroneous. Apologize about that. Members will also be required to report hours of instruction by program area. So let's change this just a little bit. It's the total 17-18 expenses by program area, which includes all those fund sources I mentioned, including fees. It also includes hours of instruction by program area. So I apologize for that mistake there. And people say, well, what is this going to look like? So here's a crude visual of what it might look like. I don't think it's going to look like, but I wanted to show you kind of the program areas on the left side. Here are the program areas for adult ed. And then we have hours of instruction by program area. And then we have all these different fund sources. You have your AEBG or AEP funds. You have your WIOA 2. You have your CalWORKs, your Perkins, your non-credit apportionment. If you get K-12 jail funding, your local control formula funding, any fees you charge, maybe you get some ITAs from the One Stop, your WIOA 1, other funding, and then it would include operational costs as well. So total costs to run the program. And so that's a lot of information to provide. So we will be working with you over the next 6 months as this report comes online to work with you to explain what we mean by this. We have done some of this reporting in the past, but I think it's where the operational costs kind of hung us up, and we did have kind of a field team look at that, and we did do last webinar some explanation of what operational costs are and how they determine operational costs. So we'll continue to provide more details on that, and then when NOVA builds this out, we will show you actually what the screens look like, tell you when these are due, and answer any questions you may have. So this is not how it's going to look, but we wanted to introduce you and also give you a heads up that it's not going to be something due right now, that it's so much information to ask that we're going to put it off until hopefully the early springtime. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions about these requests. Okay, so I'll go back. Jose, 1718, for 17, we still require as members to report by program area. So yes, for 1718, you will be required to report hours of instruction by program area and all the expenses by program area. So I know it was suggested by some consortia that we should do this on a regular basis. We haven't had that discussion yet with the field. If for Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, we're going to be reporting by program area every quarter. Right now, the request by the legislature was kind of a one-time thing for 1718 funds. It was specific to 1718. I think what the legislature is doing is thinking once they have the hours of instruction and the total cost of program, they could look at the cost of, charging no fees for CTE or charging no fees for anything. So that's why we want to have correct information, because once people get this information, they're going to do things with this that could impact us. So we'll work with you to get the best information. But for right now, this is a one-time thing, and I guess we'll evaluate if we want to make this ongoing or not. We're not sure the magnitude of the difficulty for doing this, but it is a legislative requirement for the 1718 funds and expenditure reporting. So Shelley asks, will there be direction on reporting by instructional hours? Yes, we'll get that out to you. Remember, this was just part of the budget bill that went through, that was passed, and we just reviewed it last month. So we'll get more details on that. Next question, can you make the correction project code? So for those of us that may need to review the PowerPoint, yes, I will do that. I apologize about that. Some of my consortium members are not on this webinar. Where can I record this webinar? And Veronica, I think, has the link. Yes. Hours of instruction will be pulled out of TE and MIS. So for to answer Amy's question, we'll have to evaluate that, because people have attendance systems like ASAP and Schoolhouse, and so I don't know if it will be pulled out of TE. Same thing on the college side. They do a 320 report for the FTES, so I doubt if it will be pulled out of MIS. It'll probably be pulled out of their FTES 320 report, which does a recalculation in February. So those kind of details will be explained later as we dive kind of into this. There's a lot of specific detail around how we calculate hours of instruction and how we calculate expenditures by program area. So more to follow on that. Stacy says in WIOA they group ABE, ESL, EL Civics together in one resource. It would be easy if this some of the reporting requirements had the programs aligned. Sorry, Stacy, there's specific guidance in the legislative bill that was passed of how the programs are to be separated out. They do want to see ESL and ABE separated, so apologize for that. And thank you, Veronica. We will update that PowerPoint today. Our consortium member left. How do we get a new login number? Nicole can follow up with you. So Dan and Patty, if you can let Nicole know what consortia and what district you're with, she can follow up with you. Erica says, can you match the categories with WIOA program areas and resources? I think what we're separating out under this is ABE, ASE are together, EL Civics and ESL are together, but we don't run our programs like the federal program, so unfortunately you will have to split out your ASE, ABE, your ESL, and so that might be a little difficult, but I'm sorry, that's part of that legislative requirement. So our TOPS Pro data for hours that will be used for this crude report, right? So you'll have to go back CNP for looking at your attendance accounting system, and is it picking up all those hours that are going into TOPS Pro? You'd probably want to make sure that that's correct, because sometimes TOPS Pro used to collect only the WIOA program areas. I would just double check if they're downloading all your hours from your attendance system into TOPS Pro for those other program areas. So that's something you'll have to do. And WIOA are combined. So Jody, I mean, that's something we'll have to take up with the legislature. I don't think they're going to amend it. It's in the bill. So we do have to break it out by program area. So federal versus state, this is a state requirement. That's a federal program. Can't do anything about it. Would this form be in NOVA? Yes, it will. And then flow for LCFF to report if it only deals with K-12, not adult. You'd only report the cost of running your adult ed program. So if your district gives you LCFF to run a program, or if they give you a building, or they pay their operational costs to run the program, that would be reported. If the district has LCFF funds to run the rest of the K-12 program, that would not be reported, only your adult funds. And so we'll cover this later in a webinar. We just wanted to give you a heads up that this is coming, but we have about 6 months to prepare for it. And Will says for computers that were purchased in the classroom by CTE could be broken up into so when we talk about operational costs, we did last webinar talk about, how districts use a percentage and how they calculate operational costs. So we'll go over that again. You could look at that past webinar and see how a college does their operational costs and see how LAUSD did their operational costs. It's in the slides from the past webinar. Okay, so Ryan is addressing Lonzi's question. Does he mean that NOVA should show expenditure targets at the outset as soon as the budget is submitted, so members early on? So we'll wait to see if Lonzi can clarify that for Ryan. Okay, so Dan and Patty are from Monterey Peninsula. And, okay, so I think Dan and Patty, currently we're working with Barbara Martinez and John Knoll. They look like they're kind of co-coordinators filling in, but we can work back with you, and I'll share with Nicole the new information that I have for your consortia. And then Tammy said, if we use AEP for AEB, should we use another sub-resource? So it depends on how you're tracking your program areas, and we did have some examples in that last webinar that I was explaining how people have set up resource codes to track by program area. And so we'll have another webinar to address this because we don't want to get too far into it. But we know we are going to have to come up with strategies on, cost code allocations, how you're setting up your account code structure, do you do a sub-resource and things like that. So we'll have some strategies on that for the next webinar. Okay, so I think that's answering those questions. And this is just an introduction. A lot to be done in this area. So at least you don't have to do it now. But it is a bigger ask later because it does include hours of instruction and all these other program areas. Let's see what else. So let's talk about targets. So Eileen says, will the field team be included in the B? I don't know what that means. Okay, so Eileen got cut off there. So targets. So NOVA targets, just to clarify, to continue to spend down 16-17 carryover funds to 12/31/18, you will need to file a corrective action plan. Same will apply to 17-18 carryover for June 30th, 2019. So when Nicole showed you that box, that's all you have to do is complete that box explaining in the narrative, like the next bullet. This is completed via the narrative field for corrective action plan in the Q4 report area. And so you explain why you need that extra 6 months, and then we'll allow you that extra 6 months to spend down that 16-17. A little more information. So keep in mind, AEB funds or AEBG funds still have a shelf life. They do expire. We will be closing out funds every year. So for example, 16-17 funding. We have a target spending of June 30th, 2018 to be fully funded. If you didn't meet that target, then you file the corrective action plan to extend it to 12/31/18, which is the end of this year. So all activities related to 16-17 funds must cease by the end of this year, 12/31/18. And so we'll pick up who hasn't spent their funds by the end of the year when you file your Q2 in NOVA. So the Q2 is due March 1st, 2019, and it's certified by the consortia March 31st or March 30th, 2019. At that date, we'll know who has 16-17 funds still left over, and we'll recapture those. So let me show you the next slide. So Q2 expenditure reports are due 3/1, like I said, with consortia approval by the end of the month. NOVA will close out 16-17 funds in April of 2019. Each member will certify their closeout. So what we'll have is a closeout process. You'll certify that you've spent all your 16-17 funds. We'll have this first in, first out chart that will show your running balance. And so if you've expended, a bunch of funding, we'll show that you've spent down all your 16-17, that you've spent down most of your 17-18, and maybe have all of your 18-19 to go. And so if you've spent down all your 16-17, then you just say we're closing out our 16-17 funds are all spent. But if you do have remaining 16-17 funds, we'll invoice you, the state will invoice you to pay that back to the general fund. And so that invoice process will take place after the March 31st certification, so and after the closeout that you certified that you do have remaining funds. So if you did certify that, then in late April and May we will invoice, and hopefully we get those funds back before we close the books at our state accounting offices in June 2019. So that's 3-year life of the funds. We want to target spending to spend it down in the first 2 years. If you can't do that, we'll give you 6 months extra as part of the corrective action, and then the final 6 months of the life of these funds are spent doing final reporting, closeout, and invoicing, and taking back funds if there's anything left.
No, I think you covered it.
Nicole, anything to add on that closeout process before we get into annual plan? Okay, so we have about 20 more minutes, and we're wrapping up here. But let me see. So Eileen said, will field teams be included in the reporting of program area? I don't believe so. We'll have some ad hoc fiscal people looking at that, Eileen, and probably on webinars as experts and giving us suggestions on how we would do that. Sophia said the corrective action plan is actually rather simple. That's great. Christy says, if a college is our fiscal agent, are they invoiced for the funds not spent, or each member will be invoiced directly from the state accounting office? Yes, each member will be invoiced directly. So a K-12 county office will be invoiced directly by CDE. If you're a college, you will be invoiced directly by the chancellor's office. Okay, so Jose said, for 17-18, when does NOVA open the window to report fourth quarter expenditures?
It should be open now.
So Nicole,
you do have the ability
is that open now, or is there, when will that open up?
Now. It is available now. And just to reiterate, no, we don't have any time periods set in NOVA like preventing you from accessing certain things. We don't really have that built in. I mean, of course, there's still some things that we're still developing and we're still working on releasing for the future year. But for expenditure reporting, you do have the ability to access your quarter 4 report now.
Okay, thank you. And then Eileen said, just suggest that program people have a say as well. Yeah, we will include a mixture of program and fiscal people as we usually do. Okay, so there's no further questions. Let's just quickly kind of reminder on annual plan if you're still working on that. They were due last week. It's based on the 3-year plan that was extended, submitted by the consortium lead with approval of all members. The annual plan is critical because it drives your members' work plans and budgets, which are due at the end of September, and then the consortium lead certifies all the work plans and budgets by the end of October. So I think we still have a few annual plan. I think we had one question, Nicole, that they already submitted their annual plan, but when we took the limits off, they wanted to add additional language. So what would be the strategy for them if they already submitted, when we had the limits on, now that the limits are taken off, how do they update that annual plan?
Submit or uncertify the annual plan for you to make the updates now that we've increased the character limits. And then you will have to resubmit and go through the whole certification process all over again. And also, so please contact me offline because I will have to work with the developers to have the ability to unsubmit your annual plan. Right now, I don't have that functionality. So just please contact me offline and we can try to see what we can do.
All right, thanks, Nicole. So Dan and Patty, if you can put a contact email in the chat box, then Nicole can reach out to you. That would be probably the best way to do that. Okay, so just annual plans. Just remember the strategies in your member work plan must tie directly to your member budget for 18-19. The budget includes, like we have discussed, carryover as well as new funds. So if you did file the corrective action, your budget could include 16-17 funding, 17-18 carryover, and the 18-19 new funds. So you're juggling that, but because we do the FIFO, and we'll have that chart to show you how you're doing with your 3 years of active funding, that should plainly see that you've spent down, how much of your 16-17, how much of your 17-18. And remember, when we do the FIFO, 16-17 has to be fully spent before we move on to start spending 17-18, and so on and so on. So that's the whole purpose of FIFO. Although the state office doesn't require a member tactical or activity plan to show who's doing what and when, the consortium may require that member to follow up with such a plan and share at a public meeting, that could be a good idea to have. I know Jody Slider has something like that in her consortia where they have a tactical plan or an activity plan to show who's responsible, and that's very helpful at public meetings or board meetings, so you can track who's responsible for what if you have a lot of activities listed in your annual plan or strategies that members will be following up as activities and budgeting for. So Dana says, what is FIFO? First in, first out. So expenditures that come in first, go out first. So if you have expenditures in our system, the oldest funds that are active get spent down first. So right now 16-17 funds are still active, and so any expenditures charged will all go to 16-17 money until it's fully expended. Then we'll start spending down 17-18. Once those are fully expended, then we'll start working on 18-19. In the old days, people treated these as 3 separate grants. So sometimes we'll have like 5% of 16-17 money spent, 80% of 17-18 money spent, and 20% of 18-19. It didn't make any sense. It was very difficult to calculate, and people were scrambling when we closed out funding. So the FIFO, first in, first out, helps with that process. Let's see. Eileen says, I want to fix our plan too. Okay, so Eileen, I would contact Nicole directly. And then Tracy said, how do you know if we spent out 16-17 when NOVA has time figures of 16-17, 17-18? So Terry, here's how it works. In the chart, you'll have a 16-17 allocation. So the money we gave you for 16-17 will be there. We'll have the money we gave you for 17-18. We'll have the money we gave you for 18-19. Then we'll have total expenditures across the row. And so let's say we gave you $1 million for each year. So you have $3 million for each year in the chart. And so let's say you spent $2 million so far. So we would say you've spent all your 16-17. We would show you spent $1 million of 16-17. So that is 0. We close that out. Then for 17-18, you've also spent $1 million because the total expenditures to date were $2 million. So then you'll say, oh, you spent down all your 17-18. That's $1 million too. So that gets closed out. What you have left are your new funds, 18-19. You still have $1 million there because that's what you got in new funding. So that's how you will see how you've spent the 16-17. It's first in, first out. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense to Francisca and Terry. Okay, great. All right. So moving along, we have some, if you're still dealing with annual plan, we have a bunch of stuff on the website. We have YouTube, we have user manual, we have webinars. We'll do the same with the other stuff like the program area, expense reporting, and hours of instruction. We'll do a similar rollout like we did with the annual plan. We'll have a lot of tips and tools and YouTube and stuff like that available, so don't feel that we're not going to respond to that. And then, Nicole, if you wanted to go over the submission,
Thanks, Neil. I'll try not
I think
to
you
take
already
too much
covered
time,
this,
because I know
but just give a quick overview of how you submit your annual plan.
So once your consortia primary contact has completed all of the sections of the annual plan, they should navigate to the preview section to perform a final review and click on the submit button, which is located on the top right side of the screen. So you can navigate to the preview page on the left side of the screen on the blue navigation page. Once you're in the preview page, then you would access the submit button on the top right side of the screen. And once the annual plan is submitted, each of your member representatives will receive an email notifying them that the annual plan is ready for their review and approval. And there will be a link in the email that will direct them directly to the preview page for them to review the annual plan and either click on approve or reject. This screen shows what that should look like. So I am the member representative. I've received my email. I've clicked on the link. This is what my page should look at. should look like. Also, if you don't receive the email, you can always log into Nova and navigate to this page, and that should still display the reject or approve button by navigating to the annual plan and then the preview page. You don't necessarily need the link to access the approve button. So this is what that should look like. All of the other member representatives have approved the plan, and so once they approve, it's shown in green. All right. See, go into the next page. This shows the member representative that has rejected the plan. This is what it looks like. When your member representative, if they reject the plan, there will be a pop-up window that will display for them to provide an explanation of why they're rejecting the plan. This will be sent to all member representatives in the consortia so that everyone can be aware and understand why the annual plan is being rejected. If the annual plan is rejected, it then puts it back into draft status, and the consortia primary contact can make whatever edits necessary and then resubmit and go through the approval process all over again. And also, the consortia primary contact can send reminders. So if you have a member representative that has not yet reviewed, approved, or rejected the plan, the consortia primary contact has access to click on the send reminder button, and this will display until someone clicks on approve or reject. Also, if you have multiple member representatives for your agency, that's okay. Both names will display, and both individuals will have the ability to approve or reject a plan. The way Nova works is whoever gets to it first can click on the approve button. So we don't really have a way to differentiate if you have more than one person. So you'd want to work through that internally to decide who is going to be the person to actually approve or reject the plan. And then that's it that I have for the annual plan. So I'll check to see if there are any questions.
Yeah. There's a few, but we'll wait till the end. I'm just going to run quickly through these last slides, and then we'll get to the questions. Nicole, you do have a few newbies. So Dan and Patty have submitted their emails, and so did Will from Tustin. So you can check that out. I'm going to just quickly go through. So here are some of the short-term changes in Nova, just giving you an update. I think we went over some of this last webinar, but we had to reshuffle priorities due to timing and budget, programming costs, and legislative mandates. So what we'll be working on now is that closeout process and the for AEBG AEP funds. So 16-17 we'll have that closeout process. We'll also be working on the 17-18 hours of instruction and expenses by program area. So we described that, and we'll fix the slides, and I think Veronica will send that out to everyone after the webinar once we make that slide edit. Then we'll also be adding in, per the legislative requirement, the 3-year plans will be uploaded and certified in Nova, and then we'll also be adjusting our 1920 annual plan to connect to the new 3-year planning process. So this is a big legislative mandated changes in Nova, and then later on, if we get those done, we can work on kind of the fixes that we want to do, adding those text boxes for certifying expenditure reports, adding in member certification for all allocation amendments, and adding the option to have multiple certifiers. And Nicole's kind of gone over that a few times, and hopefully we can fix that as well. And then in the future, what has been put kind of on the back burner is the consortia level reporting for admin budget and expenditures, and the community service reporting in Nova for all member agencies. So hopefully we can get to those, but those are probably next year or beyond, because we have a short window to do a lot of these legislative mandated changes, and so we don't have time to do everything. It's not a bottomless pit of money, and so we appreciate you bearing with us as we reshuffle the priorities. We'll also be on the lookout. There will be a survey coming out. The programmers want to kind of get a little more information from you as they make these programming changes and decide on how the certification works and approvals and who does what. So look for a survey that will be coming out to all NOVA users. It's pretty simple. It covers all the stuff we talked about today, all the functions of NOVA, and it asks you simple questions like who certifies, who submits, and so it'll give the programmers a better idea of how to design that. So I'd appreciate if you could fill that out and return that as soon as you get it. I think it's going to be coming out sometime next week. Okay, so with that said, I think, and then we have the website, of course. You can get into NOVA that way. And then, of course, Veronica with AEBG TAP. She is handling your questions, triaging them, answering the ones she can, and then sending the more difficult technical ones to Nicole. And so hopefully that process has been working. We appreciate all the work that Veronica and Nicole have been providing to everyone, as well as the programmers under Ryan at Product Ops. So let's go with our last few minutes here to see if we've answered all the questions. Let's see. So Karen says, a member of my consortia needs to make changes to their budget. Do I uncertify their budget and then make these changes and then I certify it again?
To make a budget
Nicole,
revision,
what would you
the process
suggest?
would be that you would need to uncertify their budget, which would then put it back into draft status, and then the member representative would need to, for the agency, would need to adjust the budget accordingly and then resubmit. We are currently experiencing a bug in the system in that the system NOVA will not allow you to uncertify the budget unless you go back and uncertify and unsubmit all of the expenditure reports back to Q1. So we are advising folks to please hold off and wait until we can get that fixed. If you do have a situation where it really needs to happen now, if you're having staff that's going to be out of the office, or you just need to do this budget revision now, please contact me and I can help work you through that process. It does get a little bit complicated because we do have to unsubmit and uncertify, and then we'll have to go back and resubmit and recertify. And also we'll have to do that for all of your members. So I can definitely help with that.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Nicole. So late breaking news, Ryan just updated us to say the FIFO chart will be in NOVA a week from today. And so that FIFO chart will provide clarity on our first in, first out accounting. So look for that a week from today. That's good news. Any other questions? So let's see. Dan and Patty says, is there a special place to locate reports due and their due dates? We need assistance. So Dan and Patty, if you go to our AEBG or AEP website, and I think Veronica can put the link in there, right on the front page of that website on the right side is a list of deadlines and due dates. We have the student data reporting deadlines, and we also have the fiscal reporting deadlines, as well as the planning report deadlines. And there it is. Thank you, Veronica. Any other questions? What do we have? Probably like two. Yeah, we have 2 or 3 minutes. And I think the takeaways today are Q4 report for expenditures. That is your final report for 17-18. We will work with you on those deadlines for reporting. If you're having technical problems, don't worry if you don't meet the September 1st deadline. And if you're a consortium, you're having technical problems, don't worry if you don't meet the September 30th deadline. We'll work with you on that. For the program area reporting, because of the additional requirements by the legislature for hours of instruction and things like that, we're going to push this off into the spring. And so NOVA will be the vehicle to report that information. We still have to work with programmers on how we're going to set that up. We still have to work with our program and fiscal people in the field to see the difficulties. We understand there are some technical difficulties on reporting hours of instruction, so we'll probably have future webinars addressing the best way to get hours of instruction and how to report those operational costs. I think somebody had like a computer lab, and how do you cost that out between program areas. So we'll have some information and examples from field people on the best way to do that, so we can meet the requirements of the legislation. And what else? Annual plans, we talked about that. Those should be wrapping up. I don't know, Nicole, anything else that we that I forgot to summarize here? Okay. Paige said, yes, I was trying to uncertify last budget to correct and didn't let me last week. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, thank you. Rhonda says, will you be sending notification of when the bug is fixed?
Yeah, so we do now have the ability to send messages through the NOVA system
so, Nicole,
to all users.
What's your strategy on that?
So once the bug is fixed, we will be using that functionality. We will send a message to all NOVA AEBG users to let them know that the budget, that this has been resolved, and you can now go in and complete your budget revisions.
Okay, and then Francisca says, does it make sense to divide object codes by program area? I don't think I would do that. I mean, that just seems like more work than you need to do. And we'll have a webinar to talk about best practices on how we're going to approach that. I don't want to have you go off and start doing a lot of work that might not be the most efficient way of looking at it. Our budget reports don't divide by program area. So we'll come up with some strategies, Francisca, about maybe using percentages of enrollment, using that if you don't divide things by program area. And we'll talk to other districts on how they do that. And so look for more information on that. We want to make this easy, but we want to have good information from the legislature because they will be taking this information and doing things with it as far as future funding. If they give us extra funding, if they're going to fund certain program areas, make CTE free, they need all this information. So we got to have good information that we give back to them. So we'll do plenty more webinars. We'll do focus groups. And so we'll have more information on that topic. Is this presentation recorded to look at later? Yes, if you go up, I think Veronica posted the web listing of where you could get the archive version from today. And Jody says we separate the program area by goal in accounting system, right? Goal codes are important in your SACS process. And Veronica just posted the webinar archive again, and she'll post it at the end of today. So, last comments, last questions. I don't know, Ryan, anything?
No, another good webinar.
Final words to anybody,
Hope
Ryan?
everybody had a nice summer. As Neil mentioned, the survey will be going out. So please participate because that's just going to inform how NOVA helps you better going into the future. And if anything comes up, just utilize the help desk in NOVA if that's a feature request or guidance through something. So we're always available.
Yeah, so just to add to that, the survey will be coming
through
a message
Ryan.
From the NOVA
and
system.
Nicole, any last comments?
So it'll be coming from NOVA, so look out for that. I just don't want anybody to miss it. And if you could really if you could please take the time to fill out that survey, that would really help us out as we're further developing features in the system and also fleshing out the user roles and access levels for all of the users and how we should label that. And also, I just wanted to thank Neil and Ryan. Thank you so much for being on the webinar today, and especially to Veronica and all of her help in helping to filter through the help desk requests and the emails that come through. I know that she's been kind of doing a lot of that, so I really want to give a shout out to Veronica. Thank you so much.
Great. Well said, Nicole. And with that, and if you missed it, if you came on late, Veronica will post the archived version, and we will send out the updated PowerPoint that reflects that one slide that we're going to make a correction on. With that, I'll turn it over to Nicole, actually Veronica, for closing comments and instructions.
We greatly appreciate you staying on. I am about to close the webinar, but before I do so, I wanted to inform everybody about our upcoming webinars. We do have a webinar slated for next Thursday, August 30th at 12 o'clock p.m., and that's going to be talking about using new MIS elements to track educational functioning levels and transition into post-secondary education. So if you haven't done so already, please be sure to register for that webinar. I just posted a link into the chat pod. And now I'm going to close the webinar, and the evaluation will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation. We definitely listen to you through the evaluation and address any issues that you may be having, technical issues, having the PowerPoint readily available prior to the webinar, and all of those things. So if you have anything that you would like to tell us via the webinar, please be sure to do so. Everyone have a great afternoon and a great weekend.